The gilded spoon gleamed like a jewel under low chandeliers, brass rails polished to a mirror, crystal breathing soft constellations across white linen. Wealth moved here without hurry, a tide of perfect tailoring and quiet appetites, leaving rings of condensation on marble as proof of passage. Anna threaded that tide with practiced grace, balancing plates that smelled of butter and ocean, returning smiles that never reached her eyes. 10-hour shifts had taught her the choreography: pivot on the left foot, glide on the right, vanish before gratitude forms. Beneath the apron, muscles ached. Beneath the ache, a ledger ran constant: rent, tuition, transit, the next textbook that cost a week's tips. Every corner whispered hierarchy: corner banquettes for the chosen, drafty tables for the tolerated, service corridors for the invisible. Somewhere between seatings and station resets, she measured a life by steps taken and steps withheld, a scholar disguised as a server, learning how power eats when it thinks no one is watching. In the thin-walled apartment that waited beyond the last subway stop, language towers reached the ceiling. German case studies, Italian poetics, Mandarin debates annotated in pencil worn to nubs. Columbia's bursar ledger showed red, her notes showed meticulous black. She lived by the grammar of survival, subjunctives of what might be, conditionals of what must. With dawn alarms and midnight readings, she translated hunger into focus, balancing phonetics with bus schedules, morphology with double shifts. The restaurant was fieldwork masked as labor, a living museum of accents and authority, of velvet euphemisms hiding blunt demands. Every table offered a study, hedge fund certainty clipped at the ends, old money vowels stretched like silk, new tech bravado crashing into etiquette like a careless elbow. Beneath the service smile, she measured cadence and motive, finding the seam where courtesy split to reveal disdain. It was not bitterness that kept her spine straight. It was the quiet arithmetic of purpose multiplying beneath pressure.
Alan Harrison patrolled the dining room like a man timing a metronome, ears pricked for a knife out of alignment, eyes trained for a napkin folded wrong by a fraction. Decorum was his doctrine. Fear was its ceremony. He loved the view from the pass, where heat and urgency made obedience shine. Staff meetings ran on the same current, short, tense, laced with the implication that failure spread like oil, and someone would pay for the stain. Anna understood his tells: jaw tight when reviews dipped, fingers tapping glassware when VIPs were mentioned, voice smoothing only when a benefactor waved. He preferred compliance over competence, and found both in her, exploiting it with the assurance of a man who assumed gratitude from those with less. The clipboard whispered sentences before he spoke them. Today, it named a trial wrapped as compliment. She accepted the assignment with a nod that gave nothing away, filing the moment under tests she meant to pass. Jessica wore seniority the way some wore perfume: strong, expensive, impossible to ignore. Pearls hugged her throat. A practiced pout softened reprimands into coups. She curated missteps like a gallery, positioning others' errors under the best light. New hires learned to fear her kindness, the sort that switched table numbers without witnesses or forgot special orders that returned cold fury to the wrong hands. Anna had seen the choreography, the way gossip traveled faster than steam through swinging doors, the way praise was rationed to preserve scarcity. Envy lived comfortably in Jessica's gaze, hooded and calculating, especially when tips flared toward Anna's station or a compliment crossed the floor. It wasn't personal, except it always was. Hierarchy demanded offerings, and the offering Jessica preferred was composure cracked in public. She watched Anna's poise like a hunter tracking breath in winter air. Every immaculate plate sent by Anna felt like a challenge answered. Every near miss promised a celebration rehearsed.
The call came with a pitch shift in Harrison's voice, a half-tone higher that meant real stakes were stepping through the door. Cole Riker. The name moved across the kitchen like a cold front, leaving tightened aprons and extra polishes in its wake. Articles had named him a builder and a breaker, a man who bought time with money and returned neither. He existed in headlines and hostile takeovers, rumored tempers and austere philanthropy. Staff who pretended indifference abandoned it, calibrating place settings to angles that felt superstitious. Table 12 was pulled like a stage, window light sharpened to a blade, crystal aligned as if symmetry could tame a storm. Anna read the shift the way she read vowels, how fear lengthened syllables and clipped instruction short. VIP nights demanded invisibility that left fingerprints only in perfection. She smoothed her apron and studied the room's reflection in the water pitcher, checking where the world might crack. Assignments arrived as praise braided with threat. Harrison declared confidence the way a judge declares sentence, smiling for optics, sharpening for effect. Table 12 belonged to luckless legends and staff cautionary tales, a corner that amplified every error and memorialized each flawless course with silence. Anna accepted its orbit and mapped the terrain. The drafts that brushed cuffs, the wobble in the marble to correct with a folded coaster, the path to the past that spared collisions when runners panicked, service steps unspooled on muscle memory, menus presented at the same angle, water poured to a measured line, wine towels pressed so no drip traveled from lip to cuff. She marked where Jessica stationed herself for the best vantage, and how the manager's reflection in the window would let him monitor without seeming to stare. On nights like this, a server moved like a fuse. Patience burned, precision kept fire from reaching powder too soon.
Fabric can lie, but it can also fortify. The white pressed shirt stiffened her shoulders. The black apron turned nerves into cinched resolve. She knotted her hair until the last stray strand surrendered, trimmed nails to a neutrality that reflected nothing but the room. Her shoes remembered every tile seam and treacherous dip. Her hands remembered temperatures by instinct, the warning heat that preceded blister. Breath slowed into countable sequences, a metronome secreted beneath the ribcage. She reviewed German declensions the way others recited prayers, not for use, simply because rigor soothed. In the mirror by the staff lockers, fluorescent light flattened everyone. Still, the face staring back refused to flatten. Tired, yes, but edged. She turned once, checked the pocket weights, balanced check presenter against order book, felt the clock tighten above the line of her collarbone. When the host stand light flicked, she moved. Armor does not promise victory. It promises readiness when the blade drops. Power entered without needing announcement. The door opened and the dining room inhaled. Cole Riker cut through sound like a prow through fog. Tailored lines so exact they suggested contempt for error. On his flanks, two executives matched pace with the look of men measuring peril in inches, eyes scanning exits and opportunities at once. A hostess smiled the smile reserved for names that moved calendars. Harrison appeared as if conjured, posture tilted toward tribute. Chairs waited. Napkins formed a row of swans. The city outside smeared into watercolor against glass, while inside everything sharpened to points. Knife tips, cufflinks, the underscore of polished shoes on tile. Anna registered details for distance. The coolness at his temples, the way silence settled near him as if calibrated, the minuscule pause before he accepted a menu, the impatience pretending to be economy. She reached the table with the kind of calm that takes rehearsal and a will that refuses tremor.
Places arranged themselves around force. The corner window bowed without moving. The staff orbit widened, and conversations near table 12 trimmed adjectives. Riker's presence altered physics. Even candles seemed to hold steadier flame. Harrison hovered at a remove that read as proximity in photographs. Marcus Blake and Tom Barrett watched their boss with the flinch-ready attention of men who had learned the cost of missing a cue. Anna felt the microclimate change on her skin, colder by a degree, sharper by intent. She cataloged the posture, the settled spine that denied apology, the slight forward tilt signaling appetite for conflict. Some patrons demanded warmth. This one demanded vectors. Predators thrive on small surrenders. She offered none.
No extra deference, no unnecessary chatter, no space for contempt to test its footing. The room might arrange itself around power, but precision refuses choreography. She placed stillness between them like glass, clear, unmarked, and possible to ignore without breaking. Greeting lines flowed with the polished neutrality that keeps service human while denying purchase to judgment. Menus came to rest at the same angle. Water rose in glasses to a measured horizon. Napkins drew quiet arcs onto laps. Anna kept her expression professional enough to be unreadable, gaze steady enough to be undeniable. Riker's look traveled like a scan, weighing utility before personhood, pausing on hands as if capability lived there more than in eyes. She recognized the audit. She had written papers on the phenomenon, how certain men assessed, then dismissed, then tested again to confirm dismissal. Answers would come later. For now, she drew boundaries out of choreography. No spill of words, only service. No invitation to disrespect, only competence. Around them, the restaurant resumed a careful hum, every table pretending not to listen, as if pretense could hide hunger. First contact mattered less for what it said than for what it refused to yield.
Menus were prelude. The test followed. Cole Riker's tone carried that controlled cruelty only men long accustomed to being right could master. He dissected the wine list, his questions engineered to expose ignorance disguised as casual inquiry. The distance between challenge and insult narrowed with each syllable, the quiet spectatorship of his executives sharpening the moment into performance. Anna matched each question with precision, her cadence calm, facts exact, never rushed. Bordeaux rainfall, harvest temperatures, the chemical whisper of oak aging. Her composure became its own defiance, a mirror polished so smooth that arrogance reflected back distorted. A lesser mind might have taken satisfaction in his surprise. Anna took data instead. Intonation shifts, a twitch at his temple, the flicker of recalibration in a man who rarely met correction. Every answer was a tile laid toward equilibrium. And equilibrium in a room like this was rebellion performed in heels. The meal turned into theater. Dishes rejected from microscopic flaws, seasoning debated as if it carried moral weight, napkins repositioned to prove authority still intact. Riker orchestrated discomfort with effortless rhythm, drawing discomfort out of those forced to orbit him. Marcus laughed at the wrong cues, Tom nodded too fast, and Harrison's strained smile pulsed behind the service line. For Anna, the rhythm was familiar, the weaponization of entitlement, the way some men mistook cruelty for conversation. She let apologies glide, her tone velvet over steel, ensuring each correction left no trace of emotion. Still, each cruelty recorded itself beneath her ribs like tally marks of restraint. The insult was not yet spoken, but its presence already hummed in the air like static before a storm. Even the light seemed complicit, bending toward his table, sharpening edges until every reflection glittered like prelude to something that would cut deeper.
Jessica lingered near the wine station, her lips curved in spectators' delight. Every complaint from Riker was a melody to her ears, every returned plate an aria of downfall she could savor without guilt. She whispered to a passing runner, words shaped for contagion, rumors of Anna's arrogance, whispers of a server who thought herself too good for her station. The kitchen absorbed gossip like heat. Soon, eyes followed Anna's movements, not with camaraderie, but curiosity. Jessica's satisfaction came from precision cruelty, the slow erosion of dignity performed in plain sight. Yet even in that glee, she misread the moment. She saw humiliation forming, but missed the steel underneath. Anna's stillness was not fear, it was containment. Across the room, amid laughter and clinking glass, Jessica believed she was witnessing collapse. What she was actually seeing was pressure forging shape, a quiet gathering of force preparing to reverse direction. It happened in a heartbeat too small for cause and effect to separate. A careless gesture from Marcus nudged the table's edge. One droplet of water escaped the silver pitcher's spout. It traveled in slow clarity, curved, and landed precisely on the sleeve of Riker's charcoal jacket.
The contact was nearly soundless, but consequence thundered in silence. Conversation stalled. The dining room exhaled. Harrison's breath caught somewhere between prayer and panic. Anna's instinct moved before thought, napkin in hand, apology forming. But even before it reached air, the weight of stillness stopped her. The droplet darkened fabric like accusation, a stain too minor for apology, yet too symbolic to ignore. She felt every eye in orbit awaiting the inevitable detonation. Somewhere, Jessica's grin sharpened. This was how humiliation began in places like this, not with mistakes, but with moments small enough to justify cruelty disguised as control.
The room obeyed a law older than etiquette. When power pauses, breath halts. Cole Riker lowered his fork with the precision of a man used to commanding gravity. He regarded the droplet as though it represented cosmic failure, an insult to the order he curated around himself. Harrison froze mid-step, torn between intervention and self-preservation. The two executives ceased even pretense of appetite, their expressions blank masks of witness. Anna stood, anchored in calm terror, apology ready but trapped behind professionalism. The sound of the restaurant dimmed into heartbeat tempo, every clink now criminal. Riker's gaze moved from the stain to her face, cataloging offense, measuring consequence. He didn't raise his voice, the silence was punishment enough. In that held moment, class, gender, and labor condensed into a single droplet, marking cloth, an accidental truth about hierarchy that would soon unravel every defense built to sustain it. German slid from his tongue like a scalpel, smooth, precise, cutting deeper for the assumption that it went untranslatable. The insult came dressed in civility, phrased to sound like commentary rather than contempt. Empty-headed. Decorative. A girl pretending intellect. His subordinates released obedient laughter, forced and brittle. The cruelty wasn't in volume, but in calculation. It relied on her presumed ignorance to cloak intent. Anna understood every syllable, each inflectional choice an academic exercise in humiliation. The insult hit not as surprise, but confirmation. This was how power spoke when it forgot to perform decency. She felt heat bloom under her skin, then recede, replaced by an uncanny calm. Knowledge turned from defense to weapon in a single heartbeat. Around them, the restaurant's rhythm resumed. Cutlery, conversation, music, all unaware that a new language had entered the room, one that would soon rewrite the order of things entirely.
Understanding carried its own violence. Anna absorbed the words, dissected syntax even as dignity trembled inside its glass case. Her mind cataloged his mistake, an errant dative case, a misused verb prefix, tiny fractures in his authority. But grammar alone wasn't enough to balance what he'd taken. Humiliation had flavor, metallic, bitter, lingering on the tongue long after shame should fade. She'd spent years studying power's linguistics, how tone shaped dominance, how fluency disguised cruelty, and now theory demanded practice. She didn't reach for anger, she reached for control. Her heart slowed to academic pace, her breath to metronomic precision. She met his eyes, saw not malice, but certainty, the unexamined conviction that she couldn't possibly understand. That certainty would be his undoing. She set down the pitcher deliberately, motion smooth as punctuation. The moment stretched thin, translucent as film. One breath remained between insult and inversion, and she chose where to cut. Time split into slices. In one, she remained silent, the obedient server absorbing degradation like linen absorbing spill. In another, she stood within herself and watched the balance of power sway, fragile but movable. The insult echoed in her memory with surgical clarity, each consonant sharpening intention. Between anger and dignity lay a thin line of calculation. She stepped onto it. Her posture straightened, expression cooling into academic neutrality. Riker's gaze flickered, mistaking composure for submission. That misreading granted her freedom. She drew breath as if drawing steel. No tremor betrayed the pivot forming beneath her calm exterior. Her silence became tension, her stillness a stage. The decision completed not in words, but in breath. The scholar inside the waitress deciding to speak not for vindication, but for precision. Somewhere in that quiet instant, power prepared to exchange hosts, and the room waited, ignorant of the axis about to turn.
Her voice entered the space like a new instrument, low, crisp, carrying authority, not volume. The language was his, but her mastery stripped it of ownership. Each word landed with surgical exactness, correcting his grammar, dissecting his arrogance, returning insult to sender wrapped in elegance. Gasps followed comprehension. Those who didn't understand the words still recognized hierarchy collapsing. Even the chandeliers seemed to pause, reflecting her calm as light. She didn't raise tone or speed. Control itself became weapon. The insult reversed polarity, humiliation redirected. Years of study, sleepless translations, countless lectures, condensed into a single perfect construction that placed her above him without ever stepping forward. The air shifted, shock, awe, disbelief intermingled. Riker blinked once, twice, face bleaching to the color of his suit's threads. For the first time, his power hesitated, cornered by a truth too articulate to deny and too public to repair. Sound fractured slowly, first the clink of one fork, then murmurs cascading through tables like wind through leaves. Every gaze turned toward table 12, the locus where hierarchy had inverted. Harrison halted mid-stride, understanding only that something irreversible had occurred. The executives' faces drained, one gripped a napkin as if for balance. Riker sat motionless, authority leaking from posture like heat from cooling metal. Anna's composure held, her hands steady, eyes level. Around her, awe coiled into tension. The spectacle of a man undone by intellect reverberated through every onlooker who'd ever bent under similar weight. For a breath, humiliation existed unspoken, shared between predator and prey who no longer fit their roles. Then the moment broke. Conversations resumed too loudly, laughter too forced, the restaurant pretending normalcy. But the illusion had shattered. On a single drop of water and one perfect sentence, the architecture of power had begun to collapse.
Harrison lunged from the pass with panic disguised as professionalism, the rehearsed smile trembling at its corners. His instincts screamed containment, apologies, discounts, anything to restore equilibrium before the dining room caught scent of scandal. But Cole Riker lifted a hand, a small gesture that froze movement like command in a military drill. No one in his orbit disobeyed that signal. The manager stopped mid-stride, sweating under candlelight, mouth still open around half an apology. Riker's eyes remained locked on Anna, studying, recalibrating, his authority stuttering for the first time in public memory. Silence pulsed again, not fragile now, but dangerous, heavy with calculation. Anna's breath stayed measured, her gaze unwavering, the power dynamic seesawing in increments visible only to those fluent in humiliation. Around them, the room exhaled in whispers. Something irreversible had cracked. The insult meant to shrink her had instead enlarged her beyond the reach of his command. The words came soft, deliberate, yet thick with disbelief from onlookers. Cole Riker's voice, newly uncertain, carried an unfamiliar edge of concession. He told her to remain, no dismissal, no rebuke, then gestured to the vacant chair across from him. The audacity of the invitation rippled outward like a physical shockwave. Servers halted mid-step. Harrison's eyes darted, seeking guidance from rules that suddenly no longer applied. Anna hesitated only a fraction, reading the deeper meaning beneath the command. Not grace, but fascination. Power, confused and curious, had turned inward, questioning itself. She remained standing, spine unbent until instinct, no, strategy, told her that defiance required movement, not retreat. Slowly, she pulled out the chair and sat, the scrape of wood against marble marking the exact moment hierarchy failed. Riker adjusted his cuff, concealing turmoil behind etiquette, but the balance had already shifted. For the first time, both predator and prey occupied equal ground.
Marcus and Tom understood instinct faster than language could explain. One sharp glance from their employer sent them scattering, pretending purpose near the bar. The stage cleared, leaving two actors beneath 100 unblinking eyes. Around them, the restaurant resumed its simulation of calm. Cutlery restored, laughter forced, music resumed as camouflage. But every motion betrayed attention. Every ear stretched toward table 12. Anna sensed it. felt her name forming in unseen mouths, yet her focus held on the man opposite. Riker leaned back, recovering composure molecule by molecule. His silence was calculation. Her stillness was strategy. Between them sat the unspoken, humming like an electrical field, the insult, the retort, the collapse of his certainty. The power of observation reversed, he under scrutiny, she immune. Harrison lingered in the periphery, paralyzed between protecting reputation and self-preservation. In that charged emptiness, Anna discovered what control sounded like. It was the sound of nothing at all. Words returned carefully, stripped of ornament. Riker asked clipped questions about her background, tone halfway between interrogation and fascination. Anna answered with precision: linguistics, scholarship, survival by service. No embellishment, no apology. Each sentence was a scalpel revealing intellect beneath uniform. He studied her like an unfamiliar dialect, each response undoing assumptions layered over years of privilege. The tension shifted from conflict to curiosity, yet threat lingered in the space between inquiry and evaluation. Anna noticed how his eyes narrowed not in anger, but recalibration, the predator analyzing prey that had grown things. The conversation became dual, masquerading as civility, syntax as blade. Outside their bubble, the restaurant's pulse resumed, yet everything around them orbited slower, drawn by a gravity they didn't comprehend. By the time the bill arrived, Riker wasn't consuming service, he was consuming possibility. And Anna, exhausted but unyielding, recognized something far rarer than rage: respect, reluctantly being born.
When the proposal came, it arrived cloaked in the logic of business, not apology. Cole Riker spoke of opportunity, translation, and value, as if reading from an internal ledger. A position at Riker Industries, consultant, liaison, bridge between worlds. The figure attached to the offer was obscene in its generosity, a number so large it felt theoretical, detached from lived currency. Anna's breath stalled, thoughts racing through tuition debt, her mother's pension, nights rationing groceries. Yet underneath calculation, revulsion stirred. This was the same man who had dissected her dignity under candlelight. Could redemption truly arrive wrapped in cashmere reason? His tone suggested acquisition, not partnership. She heard the subtext. If he could not dominate her, he would own the aftermath. The air thickened between them with possibilities neither trusted. Money could erase hardship, but not memory. She nodded politely, accepting the card he extended, aware that every gift hides a blade. When power shifts too quickly, equilibrium becomes illusion. The card's embossed weight felt unreal in her palm. Promise and poison fused together. Anna's body obeyed training: smile, thank, retreat. But her mind fractured into arguments. Dignity whispered refusal. Survival screamed acceptance. She thought of rent due, of her mother clipping coupons, of scholarship deadlines balanced against exhaustion. Across from her, Riker reclined, mask restored, the faintest trace of smug curiosity flickering under composure. To him, morality was currency, spendable, replaceable, a cost of ambition. To her, it was the only possession unpawned. Yet temptation carried its own intoxication. The offer shimmered like salvation glimpsed through fog. Every humiliation endured at the gilded spoon pressed weight against conscience, tilting decision toward escape. The cruel symmetry stunned her. Insult opened the wound, and its source offered the cure. She rose with practiced grace, neither accepting nor rejecting, aware that indecision itself had become power.
The moment ended with flash and fury. Alan Harrison lunged from the kitchen, face flushed, voice shaking with misplaced authority. His hand clamped Anna's arm, bruising under pressure born from panic. To him, control meant possession, and she had broken both. The gesture stopped conversation again, every eye catching the tableau. Manager's grip, server's restraint, Billionaire's gaze narrowing. Power recalibrated instantly. Cole Riker's command sliced the air, English this time, clear enough to cut through decorum. The manager's hand dropped as if burned. The reversal was absolute. The man once her tormentor, now protector. The witness crowd struck dumb. Anna inhaled, pulse thundering behind professional stillness. No thanks passed her lips. Gratitude would cheapen the moment. She merely adjusted her sleeve and met Riker's eyes. Acknowledgement without submission. Harrison backed away, muttering apologies that sounded like surrender. Authority had devoured itself on the dining room floor, leaving only silence and shock behind. Riker's departure unfolded like a closing ritual. Wallet open, bills dropped, no glance backward. Wealth left tangible residue on linen. Folded currency, scattered tip, the faint imprint of arrogance subdued. Conversation erupted once he crossed the threshold, releasing collective breath into gossip. Harrison retreated to his office, already drafting emails of apology no one would read. Jessica hovered, envy darkening her expression, trying to calculate how disaster had turned miracle for someone else. Anna stood alone amid the wreckage of etiquette, her heartbeat steady now, her hand clutching the card like a secret weapon. The chandelier light shimmered on the glassware, reflecting her not as servant, but survivor. The evening had rewritten invisible hierarchies in public view, and every witness carried rumor like contagion. Outside, limousine doors slammed, engines purred away into night. Inside, Anna inhaled the faint scent of truffle oil and adrenaline, realizing the story was just beginning.
By morning, stories multiplied faster than facts. Jessica fed them with precision, hints of flirtation, insinuations of impropriety, whispers that Anna had courted favor rather than earned respect. The Gilded Spoon became an echo chamber, staff choosing sides out of fear or envy. Harrison, desperate to prove control, believed every rumor that absolved him of mismanagement. Shifts shortened, tips vanished, and tasks doubled. Retaliation dressed itself as procedure. Anna endured in silence, composure weaponized once more. Leo Diaz, the busboy with more decency than ambition, offered warnings in hurried whispers, emails forwarded, gossip recorded. The air thickened with suspicion. Reputation, once her armor, became target. Yet humiliation, familiar now, no longer pierced. It only hardened resolve. She realized reputation mattered less than narrative control, and she intended to reclaim authorship. The war Jessica began would end not with confrontation, but with transformation so absolute, gossip would choke on disbelief. The restaurant that once served as refuge turned hostile in increments, snide remarks layered between orders, deliberate mistakes pinned to her name, shifts moved to closing hours. The velvet drapes and polished brass now mocked her endurance. Each service felt like trial without verdict, each glance a verdict without trial. Anna performed with mechanical perfection, the only defense against chaos. Yet exhaustion accumulated, threading her veins with quiet fury. When Harrison issued another reprimand for imaginary failure, she felt the last tie to this place unravel. Humiliation had been classroom, now it was catalyst. That night, she lingered at her locker longer than usual, absorbing every detail, the hum of refrigerators, faint scent of garlic, laughter from those still inside illusion. Leaving would not be escape, but graduation. She folded her uniform, placed it neatly on the shelf, and stepped into the night air, free and frightened in equal measure.
New York's night unfolded around her in fractured neon, taxi lights slicing through drizzle, steam rising from vents like unspoken confessions. Anna moved through it in silence, the noise of the city unable to drown the echo of the evening's humiliation and inversion. The Gilded Spoon glimmered behind her, a temple of elegance now tainted by memory. Each footstep was an argument between exhaustion and awakening. She passed windows glowing with laughter she couldn't afford, apartments where other lives continued untouched by power's games. Beneath her coat, the embossed card pressed against her heart like evidence. The insult replayed in her mind, but so did the retort, the single moment when she had spoken truth and watched arrogance fracture. The world didn't know it yet, but something had shifted. The same city that once ignored her now waited unknowingly for her return. The air smelled of rain and new beginnings, dressed as danger. In her pocket, the business card pulsed with meaning disproportionate to its size. Heavy stock, minimalist font,
Cole Riker, CEO, Richter Industries, each letter embossed like currency. She turned it over under streetlight, the edges gleaming silver. It wasn't an invitation, it was a test disguised as opportunity. Accepting meant crossing into a world that measured worth in profit, not truth. Declining meant remaining in servitude defined by exhaustion. The paper seemed alive, whispering futures in exchange for compromise. She imagined the office towers where decisions silenced nations, rooms filled with glass and ambition instead of air. The idea both frightened and thrilled her. That small rectangle carried two futures, both heavy with consequence. She slid it back into her pocket, the weight anchoring her against uncertainty. Somewhere in the maze of the city, power had noticed her. Whether that was blessing or curse remained suspended in the quiet pulse of possibility.
The phone buzzed just as she reached her apartment door, a small vibration carrying the tenderness of distance. Her mother's message glowed simple. "Hope you had a good shift, sweetheart. Proud of you always. Love, Mom." No punctuation could contain its warmth. Anna's throat tightened, fatigue collapsing into quiet tears she hadn't earned the right to release. She pictured her mother in Ohio, the small kitchen, the smell of overbrewed coffee, the woman who had worked double shifts in a school cafeteria so her daughter could study the architecture of words. That love had financed degrees, not by wealth, but by sacrifice. The idea of betraying it for a job offered by a man who had called her empty-headed felt like sacrilege, yet the promise of financial freedom shimmered with temptation. She typed no reply, only stared at the screen until it dimmed, her reflection merging with those four luminous words, "Proud of you always." Morning brought more than sunlight, it brought exposure. Leah's message arrived first, a warning in lowercase urgency. Jessica had weaponized whispers into statements, turning speculation into report. Harrison, eager to preserve his authority, entertained the lies as fact. Words once her craft now turned against her, reshaped into knives. By noon, staff regarded her with that specific avoidance reserved for contagion. Conversations halted as she approached, resumes of laughter interrupted mid-breath. Yet humiliation had lost its sting. It felt almost scientific now, predictable in pattern and tone. She collected data instead of outrage, mapping betrayal with precision. Every rumor carried subtext of jealousy and fear, proof that her presence disturbed a hierarchy built on quiet compliance. By sunset, Anna understood the truth. The Gilded Spoon had ceased being a workplace. It was an ecosystem of survival fed by gossip, and she was no longer interested in surviving. She was evolving.
Her apartment mirror caught her returning gaze. Hair undone, circles etched beneath eyes too young for fatigue that deep. The uniform hung behind her like an abandoned skin. She studied her reflection, seeing both the waitress and the linguist, two identities colliding in the same thin space. The temptation to cry passed quickly, replaced by analysis. This was not tragedy, it was transition. She straightened, shoulders back, jaw set in defiance of exhaustion. The face looking back was unfamiliar, harder, sharper, aware of its power. She whispered a single line in German, not as memory, but as mantra, the sound reshaping the silence around her into intention. The humiliation had purified something essential, burned away hesitation, left purpose gleaming raw beneath. She pressed her fingers to the mirror, as if sealing a pact with her reflection. The next time she wore that uniform, it would not be for service, it would be for conquest. Night turned to early morning as her laptop screen glowed blue against shadows. Anna dived into Cole Riker's empire. Financial reports, press interviews, board minutes, investigative pieces chronicling his ruthless ascendancy. Every document revealed contradictions, philanthropy alongside mass layoffs, elegance beside destruction. He wasn't a villain from fable. He was something far more dangerous, human power refined into function. She read until patterns emerged, until cruelty became algorithm. Beneath every decision lay a linguistic structure, persuasive syntax designed to disguise exploitation as innovation. Language was his real weapon, and she now understood its dialect. She bookmarked articles, noting recurring terms, speech habits, idiomatic tells. For every insult he'd ever spoken, there existed a vulnerability in word choice waiting to be exploited. By dawn, her exhaustion turned electric. Knowledge was no longer theory, it was ammunition.
She wasn't preparing to beg for a job. She was preparing to infiltrate a system and rewire it from within.
Language, she realized, was architecture, its walls built from implication, its ceilings set by tone. Cole Riker's world operated on subtext, deals made not through contracts, but through perception. Anna traced each headline like a linguistic excavation, uncovering how power camouflaged itself behind rhetoric of efficiency, synergy, progress. Every euphemism hid a wound. Every slogan veiled a command. The more she read, the more she saw the structure of domination reflected in the smallest phrase. She began cataloging those terms, learning their grammar of deceit, preparing to speak fluently enough to dismantle it from the inside. Her years of study in linguistics had trained her for syntax. Life had trained her for silence. Now both converged. Power wasn't invincible, it simply depended on shared illusion. Break the illusion, and authority faltered. By sunrise, she had composed her thesis anew, ungraded and unwritten. Linguistic resistance in hierarchies of wealth. Her case study would begin tomorrow. Fatigue should have crushed her, yet energy hummed beneath skin like static. The city outside was asleep, but Anna's resolve sharpened to surgical focus. The decision formed without ceremony. She would go. She would meet him in his tower of glass and expose arrogance through intellect until it bent to her precision. Fear still whispered. Fear of rejection, of manipulation, of being devoured by the very system she sought to master. But defiance spoke louder. The night air seeping through the window smelled of rain and courage. She closed the laptop, stacked her notes, and placed Riker's card atop them like a seal. Humiliation had evolved into hunger. Tomorrow she would not arrive as waitress or supplicant. She would arrive as mirror, forcing power to see itself clearly. The hour before dawn felt sacred, suspended between ruin and rebirth. In that silence, Anna Jensen ceased being afraid of her own intelligence.
The email composed itself with calm efficiency, free of anger or justification. Effective immediately, I resign my position at the Gilded Spoon. No explanations, no pleas, only professionalism weaponized into finality. She attached a brief note thanking the staff for opportunities for growth, an irony too subtle for Harrison to detect. Before hitting send, she reread it once, measuring its tone. The message conveyed dignity, but its true function was liberation. As the cursor hovered over send, she felt the strange lightness of ending a sentence without punctuation. The whoosh of delivery was almost musical. She sat back, watching the screen confirm transmission, as if the act itself shifted her coordinates in the city's vast machinery. Outside, morning cracked pale against skyscraper glass. Somewhere in that reflection, the girl who had endured insult and envy dissolved. What remained was intent given form, ready to walk into power's heart wearing armor made of composure. The alarm's shrill note cut through restless sleep, summoning a new self. Anna dressed with deliberation, each layer chosen as declaration. The black dress fit clean and silent. The blazer traced strength along her shoulders. The heels measured power without apology. She tied her hair back until it resembled order, not ornament. The mirror offered a stranger, collected, polished, unreadable. The uniform of servitude had been replaced by the uniform of challenge. As light crept across the windowsill, she gathered her portfolio, thesis drafts, credentials, proof that intellect could be weapon and shield. The city beyond the window pulsed with indifference, yet she felt its rhythm align with her pulse. This day would not end with submission, it would begin with confrontation. Every insult endured had built to this hour. She slipped the business card into her pocket like a key. Outside, Manhattan's towers awaited, gleaming like adversaries she meant to conquer.
Manhattan's skyline loomed like a fortress carved from ambition. Riker Industries dominated its axis, a monolith of mirrored steel thrusting upward, slicing the clouds. As Anna approached, the morning rush parted around her, the tide of suits and briefcases indifferent to destiny unfolding in their midst. The building's glass reflected her image multiplied 100-fold, a reminder that perception was the currency here. Inside, the air was cooler, scented faintly with cedar and power. Security greeted her not with smiles, but silent efficiency, her name already in their system. Elevators whispered upward on invisible cables, smooth as authority itself. Each ascending floor peeled away hesitation. By the time she reached the top, nerves had calcified into intent. She stood among strangers fluent in hierarchy, yet something in her stride made them step aside. The tower wasn't just his domain anymore, it was her crucible, a monument to the arrogance she intended to disassemble. The lobby above the clouds gleamed sterile and magnificent, polished marble, steel sculptures, screens murmuring financial metrics in real time. Anna approached the reception desk, where a woman in minimalist black regarded her with the detached grace of someone accustomed to gatekeeping the powerful. The name Jensen triggered a flicker of recognition, followed by professional deference. "Mr. Riker is expecting you," the woman said, and motioned toward a private elevator paneled in wood and silence. Anna stepped inside, surrounded by her reflection and polished surfaces, watching courage manifest in posture. The ride to the 80th floor stretched seconds into eternity. Each tick of ascent carried echoes of past insults, every floor a rung climbed from humiliation toward confrontation. When the doors parted, she inhaled the filtered air of success, a blend of expensive coffee and control. Beyond glass doors, destiny waited behind a nameplate engraved in steel. Cole Riker, Executive Office.
The space opened like a museum to wealth, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the city in panoramic reverence, art pieces suspended in strategic lighting, silence curated for intimidation. Anna stepped forward, her heels soundless on imported oak. Assistants moved like choreography, each glance assessing her as anomaly and intrigue. At the far end, glass walls revealed a boardroom devoid of clutter, its emptiness signifying importance. Brooke Adler, the assistant with diamond-pierced precision, greeted her with polite frost and gestured toward massive doors beyond. "He'll be right with you," she said, and vanished as if erased. Alone, Anna stood within the architecture of power, feeling its hum beneath the floorboards. The view pulled at her, vertiginous, hypnotic, a city pulsing with hunger beneath her feet. Somewhere behind those doors waited the man who had tested her intellect and underestimated her worth. Inside the office, absence reigned. The desk, immense and surgical, sat empty. The walls were bookshelves organized by obsession. No clutter betrayed humanity. A clock ticked faintly, its sound amplified by isolation. Waiting became its own examination. Anna moved through the room, cataloging details as if decoding a language. Arrangement of pens by symmetry, art depicting motion restrained within frames, a single orchid in bloom suggesting controlled life amid sterility. She refused to sit, preferring to stand grounded. Power often tested patience before respect. She understood the ritual. Each minute stretched, but with it came clarity. He was reminding her of scale, positioning silence as dominance. Yet the strategy backfired. Alone, Anna claimed the room through stillness. Her calm turned absence into belonging. When footsteps finally approached behind the glass doors, she didn't startle. The lion could enter at his leisure. She had already learned how to face teeth without trembling.
Drawn by curiosity, Anna traced her fingertips along the spines of Riker's library. The titles startled her: philosophy, literature, political theory. Gouda beside Machiavelli, Wilde beside Adam Smith. This wasn't the collection of a brute, but of an intellect that had weaponized culture for conquest.
Books arranged alphabetically, annotated margins visible like scars of thought. A volume of Kant bore coffee stains. Another, The Art of War, was creased at the chapter on deception. She read it as confession rather than decoration. Through these selections, he had built a fortress of reason around a heart allergic to empathy. Knowledge here wasn't enlightenment, it was leverage. Her reflection glimmered in the glass pane protecting first editions, merging scholar with challenger. The realization chilled and thrilled her alike. Power, she thought, never hated intellect. It feared what mirrors could show. She turned as the door opened softly behind her, footsteps breaking the cathedral silence. He entered without the theater she expected. No entourage, no command to sit. Cole Riker closed the door behind him with the precision of a man who never left evidence. Today's armor was different. Dark cashmere instead of steel gray wool, an intentional disarming that fooled no one. His expression carried calculation disguised as civility. The office seemed to tighten around his presence, as if architecture bent toward authority. Anna met his eyes, unflinching, the same glacier calm that once dismantled him in front of witnesses. For a heartbeat, recognition replaced rivalry, a flicker acknowledging shared intelligence. He gestured toward the chair opposite his desk. She didn't move. Respect was currency. She would not spend it cheaply. Silence spread between them, sharp as frost. When she finally sat, it wasn't compliance, but strategy. Every movement was thesis in motion. The lion's den had not consumed her, it had merely changed its decor.
Words re-entered the room like duelists measuring distance. Riker commented on the view, on the traffic below, on details so trivial they screamed calculation. Anna responded with quiet precision, turning small talk into subtext. When he probed her background, she answered succinctly. No embellishment, no invitation to assumption. Each phrase revealed intellect wrapped in poise. The game was clear. He sought rhythm, control, the upper hand through conversational dominance. Yet every time he advanced, she deflected with the calm of someone fluent in restraint. The rhythm shifted. The interrogator found himself responding rather than directing. Across the desk, his eyes narrowed, not in anger this time, but respect tinged with wariness. The air between them hummed with unsaid recognition. Predator had met counterpart. Outside, the city glittered indifferent, unaware that inside its tallest tower, two wills were redrafting the grammar of power, one sentence at a time. When she spoke again, the tone changed. Gone was the deferential cadence of employee to employer. This was contractual sovereignty voiced through clarity. She outlined conditions: mutual respect, acknowledgement of expertise, autonomy over her work. Her words struck the air with the authority of truth rehearsed too long in silence. Riker leaned back, surprised not by content but by composure. No tremor, no hesitation, just intellect asserting boundaries. She detailed her academic commitments, her need for flexibility, her refusal to become ornament or subordinate. The language of negotiation transformed into manifesto. In her stillness, he glimpsed a mirror reflecting all he had built his empire to suppress: integrity, immune to intimidation. The distance between them narrowed, not in affection, but in equilibrium. By claiming her own terms, she altered the physics of interaction. Power did not vanish, it merely found new grammar, and in that syntax, she wrote herself equal.
For a long moment, Cole Riker said nothing. His silence wasn't dominance anymore, it was reconsideration. The usual scripts, intimidation, flattery, manipulation, had no effect on her. She had spoken in the language he respected most: precision. Her boundaries echoed through the office like bell chimes in cathedral air, impossible to unhear. He studied her posture, the stillness of her hands, the absence of flinch when his gaze sharpened. Most people mirrored his mood. She remained constant, immune to emotional climate. A faint muscle twitched at his jaw, the only betrayal of surprise. For perhaps the first time,
He was listening without strategy. Anna didn't fill the silence. She let it breathe, turning waiting into demonstration of control. Somewhere beneath his professionalism, admiration surfaced like a reluctant tide. Power recognized its equal. The silence lengthened until it became acknowledgement. The empire he ruled no longer obeyed him unchallenged. Her last condition arrived like verdict delivered in silk. She requested that the signing bonus he'd promised be redirected to create a scholarship for linguistics at Columbia, a foundation bearing his name but built on her vision. The statement sliced through expectation. He blinked, processing audacity cloaked in altruism. Money, his purest language, had been translated into meaning he couldn't fully control. Anna continued, voice steady, describing how language studies foster understanding across cultures, the very skill his empire exploited yet misunderstood. The irony hung fragrant as incense. Riker's eyes darkened, torn between irritation and intrigue. The move was genius, public benevolence forced through private pride. To deny would appear small. To accept meant yielding moral ground. For the first time, negotiation wasn't about wealth, it was about legacy. She leaned back, unhurried, the faintest trace of exhaustion hidden beneath triumph. The table between them no longer symbolized division, but transformation.
Time expanded between them. Riker leaned back, fingers steepled beneath his chin, eyes half-lidded, his mind a labyrinth of recalculations. Power didn't like being redirected. It preferred to dictate. Yet here, before him, sat a woman who had rewritten his equation entirely. The hum of the city below filled the void, an urban heartbeat syncing with his thoughts. Anna held her breath but not her gaze, refusing to break the thread of equality she had forged. Silence became dialogue, tension the punctuation between unspoken sentences. Riker's control, once weaponized, now looked contemplative, less predator, more philosopher, cornered by his own reflection. At last, he exhaled softly, a sound closer to disbelief than surrender. The balance had shifted permanently. He was no longer deciding whether to hire her. He was deciding how to coexist with her. For a man like Riker, that realization was its own quiet humiliation. The laugh that finally escaped him wasn't rehearsed. It came rough, unscripted, the sound of armor cracking under honesty. Cole Riker had not laughed like that in years, not since the world began taking his words as gospel. The mask that had ruled boardrooms faltered, revealing the ghost of someone who once admired rebellion. Across the desk, Anna's expression remained composed, yet a flicker of humanity crossed her eyes, pity perhaps, or understanding. He leaned forward, elbows on polished oak, conceding the smallest nod of respect. "You're more dangerous than I thought," he said, not as threat, but acknowledgement. The compliment disguised confession, fear disguised as fascination. The silence that followed held new symmetry, two intellects, finally speaking without hierarchy. Riker straightened, reclaiming authority through professionalism, but something fundamental had shifted. He knew it, she knew it. The empire of absolute control had developed its first irrevocable fault line. The gesture came without theatrics, his hand extended across the desk, hers meeting it in a measured confidence. No tremor, no hesitation. The handshake sealed not subordination, but recognition, a compact between equals shaped by mutual defiance. His grip was firm but not crushing, hers matched it precisely, balance rendered tactile. In that simple contact, the battle between arrogance and intellect ended in stalemate and partnership. The air itself seemed to lighten, charged with an uneasy peace. Anna sensed the shift, the way predators respect only those who draw blood. For Riker, the touch confirmed what words had implied. This woman would never kneel, and therefore, she might actually be useful. For her, it was acceptance not of mercy, but of challenge. When their hands parted, the world outside resumed its motion. The lion had not devoured her. Instead, he had offered her a place beside him, on the edge of his throne.
As Anna rose to leave, Riker's tone cooled again, restored to corporate exactness. Yet behind that precision lurked something darker, a warning dressed as civility. "I don't forgive humiliation," he said evenly. "I respect it." The words slithered through the air like promise and threat intertwined. She paused at the doorway, feeling the gravity of his gaze on her back. Respect, she knew, was his euphemism for vigilance. Admiration in his world was never safe. The predator had learned a new language, but not a new nature. Still, the acknowledgement was victory enough. Anna glanced toward the window, where morning light fractured against skyscraper glass, then back at him. One nod, cool and complete. She understood the game now. Every partnership with power was a battle paused, not ended. As the elevator doors closed behind her, she exhaled the breath she'd held since entering. Survival had evolved into sovereignty.
By evening, the world knew her name. Someone in the dining room had filmed the confrontation, the German retort, the billionaire's frozen silence, and uploaded it with a title designed for combustion. Within hours, views climbed past 1 million. The Waitress who spoke back trended globally, stitched into montages of poetic justice. News outlets dissected accents. Linguists praised syntax, and think pieces debated class warfare through grammar. Riker's PR team scrambled, spinning humility into narrative, portraying him as enlightened mentor rather than vanquished tyrant. For Anna, the fame felt detached, unreal. Her phone pulsed with messages from strangers calling her brave, brilliant, revolutionary. Yet beneath admiration lay exposure. The anonymity that once shielded her life had evaporated. Power had recognized her in a new form, the kind that didn't ask permission. The clip had immortalized humiliation's reversal, but it had also painted a target where invisibility once lived. The Gilded Spoon collapsed under scrutiny. Reporters gathered at its entrance. Headlines called it the stage of defiance. Harrison faced investors demanding explanations, his once feared authority reduced to frantic denial. Jessica's schemes surfaced when staff chat logs leaked, fabricated complaints, manipulated schedules, whispered sabotage. Within a week, she was escorted out, her pearls replaced by handcuffs of consequence. Harrison resigned under pressure, the empire of pretense crumbling in public shame. Anna didn't return for vengeance, she didn't need to. Watching from a distance, she understood poetic symmetry. Humiliation circling back to its origin. The uniform still moved through the dining room, but something in the air had changed. The hierarchy she'd once endured had collapsed beneath its own pettiness. For the first time, the city's glittering elite dined under a ghost's shadow. The woman who had once served their wine, and with one sentence, rewritten their definition of power.
Weeks later, press cameras clicked as Cole Riker stood beside her at Columbia University, unveiling the scholarship she had conceived. The Riker Foundation for Cultural Understanding gleamed on a bronze plaque, letters reflecting the afternoon sun. Reporters captured the tableau: billionaire benefactor, composed scholar, each interpreting dominance and grace in conflicting angles. Anna spoke briefly about language as empathy, her voice steady, eyes unwavering. The applause was polite, but beneath it lay a deeper current. She had forced the world to witness contrition disguised as philanthropy. Riker smiled for cameras, but the tension in his jaw betrayed unease. This gesture wasn't charity, it was atonement written in checkbook ink. When flashbulbs dimmed, Anna stood apart, absorbing the irony. She had turned his insult into education, his arrogance into access. For every future student reading that plaque, humiliation had been converted into something priceless. Opportunity forged from apology. Power tested loyalty through crisis. During a tense merger reading, linguistic ambiguity in a German clause threatened millions in liability. Executives panicked, translations clashing across legal dialects. Riker remained silent, eyes narrowing toward Anna. She read the contract once, twice, then spoke, her analysis crisp, decisive, dismantling confusion with surgical accuracy. The room froze as she explained how a single idiom reversed obligation, saving the company from disaster. Silence followed, then awe. Riker leaned back, a faint, reluctant smile flickering,
acknowledgement without surrender. In that moment, Anna earned what titles couldn't buy: indispensability. Her intellect, once mocked as decoration, now anchored empires. Outside the glass, clouds drifted like pages turning. She had rewritten humiliation's aftermath into competence unassailable. When the meeting adjourned, murmurs followed her exit, the rare sound of respect uncoerced. Even Riker's reflection in the glass seemed altered now, smaller against the vast horizon she had mastered.
Weeks bled into months, and the hierarchy inside Riker Industries began to warp. Executives deferred to Anna, subtle at first, then openly, seeking clarity, mediation, interpretation. Riker watched with unreadable calm as influence migrated across his domain toward her gravity. Meetings, once dominated by his monologues, now paused for her analysis. He didn't stop it. Part of him admired the inevitability. Yet admiration carried discomfort. Power hates equals. Late at night, alone in his office, he replayed her words from that first confrontation, realizing she had not merely corrected his grammar, she had corrected his worldview. Anna, meanwhile, moved with quiet precision, never flaunting her assent. The staff whispered her name with awe, the same syllables once muttered in pity. Somewhere in that assent, she understood that victory was not triumph, but equilibrium. Proof that even in cathedrals of arrogance, intellect could redraw architecture itself. Dusk poured molten gold across Manhattan, the skyline burning with promise. From the 80th floor, Anna stood by the window, watching light fracture against glass towers, symbols she no longer feared. The reflection staring back at her wore calm mastery, not armor. The waitress was gone. In her place stood the architect of her own destiny. Behind her, the office hummed with muted reverence, the empire realigned by intellect and quiet rebellion. Down below, the city's arteries pulsed with stories of survival, some unfinished, some yet to begin. Anna touched the plaque on the wall, a replica of the scholarship she'd created, and smiled. Humiliation had not destroyed her, it had refined her into purpose. The language that once wounded now built bridges. Outside, night began to bloom. In every window's reflection, the world she'd conquered shimmered back, whispering in every tongue she had ever learned. You spoke, and the world listened.